What's good, everybody? What's going on, man? It's Stephen Qualls II, aka Mr. Qualified. It's your boy, and we're back for another episode of the Wright Quality Podcast. We will address the elephant in the room right away. Miguel needed a break. Okay, he is put on timeout. Until further notice. If y'all have been keeping up with the pod, he has increasingly gotten more and more out of hand. Let's just say that. So he is taking a timeout. No, it's not really a timeout. He is busy today. But however, for y'all that have been following the pod for a long time, we are back to the OG2. No disrespect to Emilio, but we are back to the OG2. And yeah, we just gonna hop right into topics. But for people that don't remember or aren't OGs or haven't been following the podcast, co-host, please remind them of who you are.
Ashley Wright the first, best curls on the pod. Nobody to debate me today. I'm so happy about that. Miguel can't debate me on the curls. So yeah, best curls on the pod.
I just feel like across the board, we as a collective have just like good hair. You know what I'm saying? Like all of us got hair that we can hang our hat on. No pun intended. You know what I'm saying? But we gonna hop into these topics, man, because it's a lot that's been going on in the sports world that we have missed. But a lot of these are more recent topics, and so yeah, we just gonna hop it right into it. The first one: no more Woj bombs. No more Woj bombs. How do you feel about this? What are your thoughts on this?
Initially, I was like, well, how am I going to get my news? Like, who else is as credible as Woj? Like, I don't know. I feel like, man, my childhood is like officially over. Like, no more Woj bombs. We're getting retirements left and right of people we grew up watching. Like, times are changing in the league, man, and I'm just not ready for it. I'm so sad about it. Like, some of the best Woj bombs came through from him. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of like the biggest trades that he announced. Like any trade that was worth going, oh my God, over, he did it. Even those small ones. So like
Right.
without Woj, it feels kind of different. We have, I guess, kind of grown a bond with Shams from Bleacher Report. So I guess maybe he'll become the new. Well, there will never be another Woj, but maybe he'll be the new guy that we look to. But man, that kind of hurt. That stung.
Yeah, the Woj knew, and it also just felt so weird and so random. And granted, there are probably a lot more things behind the scenes that us as casuals we don't know about. I ain't tapped none of the people I know at ESPN, so I don't got no insider news. I'm not Woj, right? You know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, that is a tough blow to the sports community, and I think Woj was just. I think it's hard to find credible sources, and it's hard to find sources that people trust with information such as trades or whatever the case may be. So somebody building that rapport is probably going to take a while. But I will say, and something I have seen is that a bit of the chatter that has came from Woj's retirement has been that potentially as Woj was ascending that Brian Windhorst, Wendy, for y'all that know, has been at ESPN obviously and has kind of per the reports, not my words, not my words. Don't come at me. But they were saying that Wendy kind of felt like he was in the shadow, a little bit.
Oh,
But Wendy's always been a credible source. He's always been, trusted by players and other media, coaches, whatever the case may be. So I think Wendy could easily ascend into that spot. And I think with him, and not that it's a matter of it being between him or Shams, because I think it doesn't really matter at that point because they're both trusted in the same capacity, in my opinion. But I think Wendy could kind of bridge that gap to where he's a familiar name and a familiar face. So if people were really looking around like, hey, where are we getting our sports news from now? I think Wendy could step up and essentially become, it won't, like you said, it won't be the new Woj, but maybe Wendy bombs don't sound the same. We got to find him another, we got to find him another thing to go.
Wendy Breeze or something.
Got to workshop it. Got to workshop.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like Wendy. I've been watching him for a long time at ESPN. I think, the way he relays news is nice too. So, I mean, but if I'm in the shadow of anybody, if it's Woj, I'm cool. Like I'm chilling out because Woj he's that guy when it comes to reporting. But I mean, I guess I understand being at the point in your career that Wendy is at. But if he were to become that guy, I know that he's a credible source. He's been covering LeBron since I can remember. So, yeah, I wouldn't be mad if Wendy was to step into that role.
Yeah, that's real. And I mean that could go into a whole rabbit hole of sports media, in general, because we don't
Mhm.
have a lot of people. I feel like we haven't had a lot of people that are credible sources when it comes to things that are going around the league. Like, I think the funniest example is, Stephen A. Like, according to Stephen A., he got inside sources everywhere, but
Right.
it's not always, correct. And then outside of that, a lot of media personalities you see don't even try to say that they have insider sources. They just kind of like blatantly play to or speak in reference to their favorites or their preferences. So I think that we're in an interesting place in media where you do want to have that one person who you can trust to be unbiased in your news and then updating you on, ongoing things as it relates to trades or, whatever else the case may be. But yeah, really interesting space. And I think it's interesting this kind of like balance of having those type of media people as well as how we've seen the spot wow as we've seen the podcast space grow, and we've talked about this before, but more athletes, and granted this isn't the same as so much in the moment ongoing trades, but we've seen athletes trust those platforms to go and speak to things as well. So sports media in and of itself continues to evolve and change and just become more interesting by the day. But yeah, a lot to look forward to in that regard. Something that isn't that surprising is the latest news on Kawhi Leonard. So when Kawhi was removed from Team USA, we all were a bit confused because we
Mhm.
assumed that he was healthy. He was saying he was healthy. The Clippers were saying he was healthy. So we was all trying to figure out what was going on and if it was something fishy. Nothing fishy at all, just Kawhi being Kawhi. And he was indeed injured in some capacity, underwent some procedure this offseason, and will be limited going into training camp. But the team is optimistic about his progress. How long has this saga with Kawhi been going on at this point?
Man, look, this Kawhi debacle, like the only reason we're constantly dealing with it is because he's Kawhi. Like I'm so ready to jump off the ship and write it off and like just forget about any news concerning him until it's positive news. I hate that any news surrounding Kawhi since he won that chip seems negative, but it's just like it's a never-ending merry-go-round or something. You know what I mean? Like I hate it for him. Definitely wish him the best, especially in his rehab journey, but man, he can't catch a break.
He really can't. And it's hard because you can't fault a player for being injured. And I am
Yeah,
not one that questions Kawhi's desire to play. I do
right.
question his greatness. I do not question his skill or anything about his ability to play basketball outside of his availability, right? But when you look at his career post championship, post the second one, I guess technically,
Yeah.
I mean, how many injuries, how many missed playoff games, how many missed games in general. Like it's more sad than anything. And when you think about it, a lot of the Kawhi, lure or lore, whichever one it is, one of them two, comes from his first, like the first half of his career. And
Yeah.
granted, if we are going from his rookie year to the 2019 championship, hell of a resume. Now,
Mm,
I'm not taking nothing away from that, but I also feel like with the back half of his career, Kawhi has fell into the what if conversation, and so like, where does Kawhi rank among the what ifs of the NBA?
yeah, I mean, the biggest what if for me is still remains Derrick Rose. So like, I don't, Kawhi isn't out there yet. He still had a career that's been able to pan out, although we haven't seen as much of him as we would like. You know what I mean? One thing that also kind of stands out to me is sort of what do the Clippers do now? Like, there's no PG. So is Harden just gonna wear a cape until Kawhi comes back? The West is loaded yet again. You know what I mean? So like it's even beyond Kawhi. Um, and like you said, since that second championship, it's just been unfortunate news. Whether it's surrounded by the rest saga, like should he be resting? How many games should he be resting? People pay money to see you play, blah blah blah. And then when you get to the Clippers, a knee injury, ankle injury, hand injury, whatever the case may be. Like I said, he can't catch a break, but to your point, it's not his fault. Like he's playing the game that he loves. And when he's on the floor, he is delivering some high value basketball. So we know that he's not taking time off and lacking in his recovery or not training because when he is on the floor, it looks like he hasn't missed any time, honestly speaking. So a lot of this kind of just falls on it being unfortunate timing and then just kind of where does your team go from here?
Yeah, and I don't have the exact, facts in front of me, so I'm not sure how many years are left on his contract, but you know, Kawhi has to be, well, let me phrase this correctly. He doesn't have to do this, but it would make sense for him to potentially be considering retirement at this point, right?
That's a really, really good point. Um, Man, it's just I kind of think about it like this. Do you want to go out that way? You know what I mean? Like if you're Kawhi Leonard, you're one of the top guys. And like I said, when he's on the floor, he can still ball. Like he hasn't missed a step. It's just these unfortunate injuries where he's missing half the season, comes back, has a hell of a game, and then he's injured again, you know? So like
I mean,
that's a good question. I don't want to go as far as considering retirement. I think that that's that's a sad way to go out. But I do think you just got to cover all of your bases.
for sure. I mean, healthy Kawhi is a top 10 player, and I don't think that too many people are really debating that. It just comes down to the case of if you're healthy. I I mean, not that he's had a flawless career from a health standpoint, but if Kawhi had the health that Jimmy Butler has had, and I only say that because I think not that I feel like Jimmy is as good as Kawhi. I'm not saying that, but I do feel like they're comparable players in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of their games and how they play. It looks the same a little bit. It's very rugged, it's not the prettiest, but a bucket can be a bucket.
Yeah.
Nonetheless.
Yep.
I think Kawhi is more offensively skilled than Jimmy is a bit naturally, but defensively, I think you get a bit of the same, from both, obviously. So the Kawhi situation is really sad, and I guess what makes it so interesting is you have to think of how many situations where if he's healthy, are we having a completely different, conversation around him outside of the debacle that was 2020. We don't have to focus on that. We already know how the Clippers get down. But
Yeah.
in other situations, the year they lost to Phoenix, 21. What does that look like? You know what I'm saying? 22, did he play at all in those playoffs? I can't remember.
Is that the ACL year?
Might have been the ACL year, but I feel like every year been the ACL year. I don't know. That's the
Yeah.
thing. His knees have been through so much. I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
not sure how much they can take at this point. But then you made a great point as well as far as a team, because even if Kawhi is, getting healthier and they're optimistic about his progress, it's not like you have a team that's set to. I mean, they could be competitive at best, maybe, but I don't think they're a top 6 team in the West with their current roster. And I don't think Harden is a guy that he can only take you so far at this point because of the type of player that he's become as more of a pure point guard. So I mean,
I think they're
go
oh
ahead.
sorry.
No, you good.
Oh, I was just saying I think their season without Kawhi goes from contender to like just staying afloat, trying to make sure you make the playoffs, like just having a good seed. Because even I feel like even in the West as a play-in team, that's not good enough for the Clippers because I don't foresee them coming out of a play-in game without a Kawhi. And I'm saying that not even knowing who their matchup is. So I really feel like that's true.
Nah, that's very real. Wishing the best for Kawhi though. I mean, again, like every time, like we can make all the jokes and say that we expect him to be hurt, that he's always hurt, but I do feel like we are talking about a generational talent, and I think it's sad that we haven't really got to see, him fulfill his prime, whatever that was supposed to look like. But I do agree with you. I don't think that retirement should be on the table. If it was, or if it was something that crossed his mind, that wouldn't be surprising. But and not that he has that many years left anyway. But it just sucks because it doesn't feel like he can catch a break. And it feels like every time we think we're about to get a, healthy Kawhi season, something happens. But, wishing for the best for him. Switching gears to college for a little bit in football, which we have not talked about a lot, but we will. Do not worry. NFL news will be coming soon, just not this particular pod. But for college football, don't know if you saw the news today, but the quarterback from UNLV is sitting out the rest of the season. Now, for context, he transferred from Holy Cross this season, and I guess he was promised, I don't know, somewhere around the area. I'm not sure if it was it 100,000? Was it
Yeah.
10,000? It was 100,000. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, he was offered or promised whatever 100K NIL money, however that was supposed to be worked out. Supposedly has gotten less than half of that, not even close to half of that, really. Not even close to a quarter of it, honestly. And for that reason, he is choosing to sit out the rest of the season. Also saw later in the day that the running back has decided to redshirt and enter the transfer portal. So I don't know what's going on in UNLV, and I don't know too much about the running back. But as far as this quarterback and NIL situation, we talked about NIL before and the impact it was going to have on the college sports landscape. But how are you feeling about this story and this news?
Man, my thing is this. If the NCAA wanted to allow the players to treat the NCAA like a business, then the players should be allowed to stand on business. If you are promised XYZ from your school and you did not get that after lifting your team over big opponents such as Kansas in the Big 12, that's part of the wins that UNLV has to get to 3-0 right now. A lot of that fell on the quarterback's shoulders as well. So if he isn't getting what he was promised, he has every right to walk out of the door. The same would be true with any coach that's on the staff. If they didn't get what they were promised, they would be eyeing a new opportunity. So I don't blame this quarterback. And I love what he said in his post about it, that he wishes the program and his teammates the best in the future. But he's got to do what's best for him. At the end of the day, each and every one of these players, they're individuals and they have one goal, which is to get to the NFL. How is he supposed to do that if one, he's at a school that isn't really even predominantly known for football? It's really a basketball school, if you ask me. And then two, on top of that, I'm not getting what I was promised. Oh, there's a bunch of different programs in these Power Four conferences that I can go to and can surely make the team and make an impact and be on ESPN primetime every night, every Saturday night. You know what I mean? So I don't blame the kid for doing what's best for him and going after what he feels like he's worth. I did see a report that his family, along with his team, meaning like his agents, feel like his price has gone up. And if you feel like that, go test it for sure. It's the same way in the league. If you feel like you deserve more money, you can go and be a free agent. So I don't blame him.
Yeah, very real. No, I agree with all points. And honestly, I mean, I'm not even gonna say it's a slippery slope because you can have people that think or that feel like, the kid, whoever the athlete is in general, either one shouldn't have that much power or should be more mindful of exercising it in that way and not so much be grateful, but should just take the most advantage of the opportunity. But the fight for NIL was pushed the way that it was, and it was fought so hard for because these players deserve to make money or to earn revenue off of their name, image, and likeness. So to your point, transferring, coming in, bringing that school that you said isn't a predominantly a football school to 3-0, beating opponents that are, football schools or are better known in terms of football programs, got to go for something. But then the question becomes, what's going on with the program and why was there a promise made that wasn't fulfilled? Because ultimately,
Mhm.
if the program promised something, honor that promise or honor whatever was agreed upon. That can't
Mhm.
solely be on the student athlete, but that's exactly why I feel like the NIL was put into place. So I agree. I don't think he's wrong. And like you said, at this point, sports is a business. We can no longer have the conversation and say there's necessarily a huge difference between the professional, level and the collegiate level. So at the end of the day, he has his options. Now, granted, this could still very well backfire, right? Like, we're not saying that because he has the ability to make this choice that it will end up being the right choice for him. But how often, do we know if the right choice is the right choice when it happens, when the player decides to sign with whoever or transfer to wherever? So, yeah, it's all up to your opinion on the matter, honestly. But all in all, I agree with you that I don't think he's wrong. I think it makes the most sense since you were not given or you haven't received what you've been promised. And ultimately, whatever that means for, the program for the rest of the year, they have to deal with that. And whatever that means for the athlete for the rest of the year or for the future, they have to deal with that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, okay. That was our quick jump into collegiate football. Jumping back out into the basketball realm. I saw this clip within the last week, and it was on Amon Shumper's podcast, and he was talking with Van Lathan, and their conversation got on a shoe, but more so in general about athletes as celebrities and what kind of helps a shoe sell by an athlete, right? What do you feel like makes a basketball shoe sell?
I feel like beyond the player themselves, like obviously you have to be known as a player, but I feel like can this shoe be worn not only as an athletic shoe on the court, but also off the court as style? That to me makes the difference in whether or not your shoe sells. Like we've seen people, I think it was like the LeBron nines, especially the South Beach version, like people wearing those and hype beast falling in love with those. And obviously Jordans are one of those shoes. But I look at Giannis's shoe and I'm like, I can't wear that out with like, some shorts and a graphic tee. Like that's not gonna work.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things because you have to get the attention of people that aren't necessarily athletic, but they pay attention to sports. Maybe they're not wearing your shoe on the court, but they want to style it with a fit. Like you can't do that with Giannis's shoe, but you can do that with a decent pair of LeBrons. You could do that with a decent pair of J's. Like that's
Book
the
is a good
difference to me.
example as well. Book shoes
Book,
kind of
yeah,
toe that line as well. So
yeah, yeah. Book shoes are fire too. So like I think that's the difference between what makes a shoe sell and what doesn't, beyond the athlete themselves.
for sure, I'd agree. That was a great point. Quickly to touch on what they touched on in the clip. So Van Lathan was essentially saying that it's like there's a story to it. So Shumpert was arguing that if a player, like if I'm really good at basketball and I have a shoe, people are going to buy this shoe because I'm really good at basketball. And Van Lathan was saying, true, that's part of it, but also there is something to that narrative, like
Yeah,
that makes somebody actually say, I'm going to spend this money on this shoe, right?
yeah.
Like for me, I say a good example. The most recent shoes that I've hooped in for the most part have been Kyrie's. And
Mhm.
one, that not only are they comfortable and more functional, right? But as somebody who's a fan of Kyrie's game, I don't feel like if I wear Kyrie's shoes, I'm gonna play like Kyrie. I can tell myself that, you know what I'm saying? But also talking about look, design, whether it's something as simple as the strap, or whatever the case may be, like that may be it for somebody. But if I'm also looking at, like you said with Bron, there are certain Bron shoes that I wouldn't probably dare hoop in, but they great casual shoes, even if
Mhm.
it's the same way. Ain't nobody hooping in ones no more. Jordan did. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? But I mean, now a lot of Jordan shoes. I mean, people had a debate all the time of like which Jordan shoes are actually good for hooping versus which ones are just street shoes anyway. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think like Giannis is a great point where I think some shoes are strictly made for athletic use, and that's fine. There's no problem with that. And if you're a big enough athlete, that'll be the case. I haven't bought them personally, but if somebody is buying Steph's shoes, I highly doubt they buying them for streetwear.
Hmm.
If you rocking Under Armour for streetwear, I ain't judging you. I'm just saying. You know what I mean? Like, it it can vary. But I do think the idea of there being a story makes sense because another part of his argument was the sneaker revolution didn't happen until the slogan of be like Mike. Like
Yes.
so like that's what pushed the shoe. Spike Lee as well helped, but that's what
Mhm.
pushed the shoe. So I do think there's a combination of yes, how great is this athlete and what have they done versus, okay, what is the athlete's story as it relates to why people are investing their money? It's the same reason of why do certain people get jerseys or how those jersey sales, increase. I think yes, it's a player's popularity, but I think that popularity isn't solely based just in the skill that athlete,
Yeah. Yep.
so yeah.
No,
But
that's a good point about the comparison between shoes and jersey sales. Great point. I agree with that.
Yeah. And so that was just an interesting clip because Shump had also made the comment that like athletes aren't celebrities. And I completely disagree with that.
Yeah.
Because I think as much as what may make an athlete popular or what may push them to celebrity status, like that would be the fact that they have to be really good, right? For the most part.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I do think that there's an aspect of that celebrity status where, like, no, when you talk about the people who are recognized, like, not even so much globally, not even saying it has to be you're recognized in the world, but just in general, even if we're looking at domestically, like just in the United States, the ones that are at the top of the top are the names that you hear from, like, okay, yeah, they're, great at basketball, but maybe, for Bron, it's everything. It's that he has the perfect family, is that he does all these things in the community, is that he's fashionable,
Hmm.
XYZ. But for somebody like Dame, right, it could be like, yo, he's great at basketball, but also like he's a really great rapper. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like this, that, and the
Yep.
third. So I think they're like with Giannis, great basketball, but that story, and then also what he's accomplished, like within that journey, like it's encompassing a lot of things. So I just thought that was really interesting. And I feel like we've touched on aspects of that, but I thought about the idea of like what really makes the shoe sell. I thought that was really interesting. So we really want to get your thoughts on that. And yeah, if you had anything else to add, but I liked what you did add in the beginning. Was there anything else?
No, that was all I had about it.
Okay, cool, cool. Staying within this realm of general basketball topics, has skill taken over IQ in basketball?
Woo-wee. That's a loaded question because sometimes, yes, has skill taken over IQ? I think regular season basketball, you can make an argument for that.
Mhm.
So when we see players like, I want to use a specific name as an example. I see Jalen Green, right? And I'm not disparaging his IQ, his basketball knowledge, but sometimes the decision making on the court is a little questionable for me, and it could be masked by his athleticism. So in times where I feel like Ime is giving him a longer leash because he could jump off the gym, it it's like, okay, this is due to your talent. But then other times he shows those flashes where he has 30, 40 points again. And I'm not saying he has to average that to have a high basketball IQ, but there are nights where he's taken a back seat and he's only had 10 points. I think it's due to that decision making and maybe raising your play level due to the competition that you're seeing on a nightly basis. But that's one player that comes to mind when you ask this question. I feel like sometimes it can throughout the regular season, which It's long. Sometimes you just don't want to think about it. You want to just go out and hoop. I don't blame you for that. Um, but in some ways, I do feel like it has become more of a talent thing than IQ.
Do you feel like it's a generational thing?
We've kind of had a similar topic before. And you remember when I was just saying in a previous episode, part of this generation is about the social media highlights and the clicks, and again, relying more on athleticism than true skill set. But I'm not taking away from what it's taking these young athletes to be able to get to where they're going in the NBA. I'm not taking away from that at all because still some type of work has to go into that to hear your name called by the commissioner. You don't just wake up, roll out of bed, and be able to do that. Um, but I do feel like it's a generational thing, but I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the hype that we surround these young players with that make them feel like it's okay to take a day off. I'm that dude. You know my name. You know who I am. I could take a back seat. My name will get me further than anything type of thing. Like, I hate to say it, we saw it with Zion. He didn't take his weight serious until there was a weight clause in his contract. But coming out of Duke, being as big as he was on social media, he was doing whatever he wanted to do, despite what anybody had to say about him. You know what I mean? So I do think it is generational, but it's not their fault.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I wouldn't necessarily say that I can't definitively say that skill has taken over or taken more priority than IQ. And
Mm-hmm.
my main argument for that is I think it's just about how you're brought up in basketball, right? So if you are taught from the onset not only the work ethic piece, but also to understand role. Like if you're going to be a star, if you're going to be the guy, great. But even within that, there are a lot of things that come with that more than just being able to score and put the
Yep.
ball in the basket. Like you have to know, okay, how do I get my teammates involved? What does that look like? When I need to take over, what does that look like? Am I coachable? What does that look like? Those are all things as the star, and those are all skills in a sense that you still have to learn. Take a role player, for example. If you have been taught like, yo, this is the role that I need to fit to be able to make it to the league or make it in the league and have a sustainable career, whatever the case may be, I don't think those players lack skill. I just think that they don't put certain skills on display because that's not needed and that's not how they're going to have a sustainable career.
Yep.
So I think it's really interesting because I think, and maybe IQ isn't the best word, but I think it's more so just the idea that like IQ gets you further. And if more
Yeah.
people realize that and then rely on skill for so long, like Zion's entering what season? Fifth?
5. I
Fifth?
think it's 5. Yeah.
That makes sense. Him and Ja about they fifth.
Yeah. 2019, right? They were class of
Yeah,
19. Yeah.
makes sense. That gotta be it
Yeah.
almost. So we talk about Ja more than we talk about Zion. And Zion, with all the hype that he had, and just with his skill set in general, we should be talking about Zion more. Even if it's not championships, even if he hasn't had a deep playoff run or anything like that, we should be talking about Zion in a different light. And I think
Mhm.
we are not because it may not be an IQ thing, but like you said, I think Zion relied on skill and hype so much that when he ran into these certain obstacles, there was nothing left to do but critique.
Yeah.
Honestly, you know what I'm saying? So I just think if players understood, and when I say IQ, I'm thinking all encompassing. So
Yeah.
not in the sense of IQ on the court in game, but IQ like the understanding of the mental aspect of this game and how do I make myself sustainable past whatever skill I have. I in that regard, I don't like that the idea of skill has, taken priority over IQ. And I don't know when exactly this started because I feel like there was a time where even if players came in and they weren't developed as much yet, or they needed to learn some more, there is this tradition, there is this kind of like journey that's referenced from a lot of NBA players and vets where you come in, you learn from your OGs and your vets,
Um,
you You go through ABC, parts of the journey till you become the vet, and then you do it to somebody else, and that's how it goes. But you got a lot of players coming in now, and maybe that's a part of it. I don't know how many, like in the last decade, I think the first round draft pick has come with more responsibility.
Yes, I was just about to say when you asked that question, when did that kind of like shift happen? And it's when kids like Zion are drafted with the first pick, and there's no one who plays for the Pelicans. Like a bunch of role players in itself. Or
Mm.
years where the Knicks were trash, like, and they had high draft picks. It's like, who is there to guide this person? Nobody. So I feel like that's when the shift happened when, you know what? When LeBron went to Miami and now everybody wants to group together and there's not enough stars to go around. Look at what you did, Bron. Look at what you did. That's when the shift happened.
You're not wrong. And we joke all the time about Bron ruining the league when he did that. But in a way, like past him going to Miami, like past the surface level of it, the how it changed the landscape of how players in the league operated, and then subsequently the league operated. Absolutely. Like it changed everything. And so not only that, again, kind of like to my previous point, on top of that, when you have these first round, when you have these like first round, or like number one draft picks, or lottery picks coming in, and they're being asked like, yeah, you got the keys, bro. Like, we want you to turn this around in at least 3 to 5. You know what I'm saying? And that's a lot, because sometimes even for a first round draft pick that's league ready, it may take 3 years before they really like ready to take a leap, like a
Yeah.
true leap. It don't always happen in year 2 or year 3. Sometimes that leap don't happen till 4 or 5. But if a team looking at you the first 3 years and they ain't pan out, you might not even get to year 4 or 5. You know what I'm saying?
Look at what happened with Shea. Like he didn't get a chance in LA. Now
Yeah,
look at him. You know what I mean? So like you said, sometimes somebody is a late bloomer, and sometimes people are like, well, he just needed a new system. No, sometimes it's just the develop.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, no, really, really interesting point, and that we can get into a rabbit hole about that for days. But ultimately, that Bron to Miami definitely changed the landscape of the league in ways that we will see for in the near and far future. I feel like, um, but yeah. So, going back to the league specifically, it isn't yet. By the time this is out, it would have been, I think, like a week from the actual day. But we are about a year removed from the infamous trade that brought Damian Lillard to my beloved Milwaukee Bucks, right? And of course, there was a lot of hype when the trade happened, and there was a lot of expectations going into that season. I, for one, thought that we should be contending, but I did not immediately think that the championship was just ours
Yeah.
to just take, right? But we know how tumultuous last year got, and we know everything that they dealt with coming into this year, right? We also, caveat to that last part, we also saw what happened with Drew leaving, going to Boston, winning another championship, et cetera, et cetera. First question, going into this season, you know what? I'm kind of glad Miguel isn't on here, because I don't know what type of biased home base answer he would have gave, but I want a non-biased answer to this.
Gotcha.
How do you feel about the Bucks, given current roster, given the fact that Dame's had an offseason to actually train, given the fact that Giannis may be, for one reason or another, a bit more motivated going into this season? Supposedly Middleton is healthy now, and our offseason signings. What are the expectations for the Bucks going into this coming season? Do you feel like with all these factors, we can truly say, yo, they should be contenders, and anything less than a finals appearance or a championship is a failure? Or are you kind of like the rest of the NBA media, where they aren't even concerned or talking about the Bucks at this point? They've already been pretty much written off.
No, now there is something to be concerned about.
For sure.
I think anytime you have Dame and Giannis on the same team, you need to have an eye on them. But as far as the East right now, I do feel like Boston is still the team to beat. I do like the signing of Lonnie Walker. While I know he's
Me
not
too.
a key
Me-
piece,
Yeah.
man, him coming off the bench is going to be something. I think the Porzingis injury is a little unfortunate, but still a team to beat nevertheless. When it comes to Milwaukee, they do deserve respect. As you mentioned, a whole off season to kind of gel, familiarize yourself with your teammates, build the chemistry. I hate that term, but it's true. You do need to have some time around your teammates. But last year was very unfortunate. Obviously, riddled with injury. That trade kind of you shouldn't expect superstars to know how to play with one another right away. At least I didn't. So last year wasn't like a complete shock to me, especially after Dame went down in that round against the Pacers. Like I pretty much figured it was over after that. But like you said, with them coming into this new season healthy, you've had an entire offseason to train. There are different expectations. I wouldn't say it's finals or die for the Bucks, but I will say anything less than a conference finals is a disappointment.
I'd completely agree with that. I don't know if I think we kind of touched on it a little bit, but the offseason signings, given what Milwaukee had available to do, were amazing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
be able to sign those three players to vet minimums. And I think that's the thing. I think everybody's looking at, oh, well, we didn't get a splash signing. I don't think we needed one, but we
Nope.
did need players to kind of fill some voids we had. So no, we didn't go get some certified or bona fide defensive stopper, right? But I do think we upgraded in all the areas of like players that we lost or let go or whatever the case may be. I think we have a lot of young talent that if Doc gives them a little bit more of a leash and gives them a chance to play and really get acclimated with playing with our core guys, I think we have some guys that are ready to step up and have a role like going into this season. I think that'll be useful with our core being so old or aging, at the rate that they are. I mean, Giannis is only 30, but even at that point, you got to think 30 feels young, but Giannis has been playing since he was 18.
Exactly.
You also got to think of the miles for the most part on Giannis's body. Not only given, people can say he missed the last two playoffs, but I'm just talking about, minutes he's playing during the regular season or, when he's been playing in the regular season, like playing in FIBA or, playing in the Olympics, like he's still been putting a lot of miles, on the body, especially since, the Bucks kind of made that turn in 2019. So, going into this season, I think it all still, depends on how things gel, right? I do think Giannis and Dame will look more comfortable and be better as a duo. I think that Doc should, I'm still keeping some faith with Doc. He Doc as of right now to start the season. He Doc. He not Glenn. He Doc. Um, but yeah, there's optimism for me, right? And I'm not thinking that we gonna blow through the regular season. I'm not thinking we necessarily gonna be this outstanding regular season team. But I do think that as long as there's continuity and as long as we are healthy, when it comes times for the playoff, I do think that there's another level that we can reach if all things are working in our favor going into the playoffs. I feel like that's been one of the main differences the last 2 years, to be completely honest. But that's kind of where I feel, on the Bucks. But I think it's interesting because you have a lot of people obviously saying, well, was the trade worth it because of, what Drew was able to go and do with the Celtics. And I'm still I was not a fan of trading Drew. I've been saying that from the beginning, but I
Yep.
also don't think you can ever be in the wrong for trading for Damian Lillard. And I know a lot of
Right.
people are saying like, "Oh, Dame's getting older." I mean, it's the same way that like if you had an opportunity to get LeBron James, depending on your roster, you don't necessarily pass up on that. And granted, we needed to build a different roster,
Yep.
around the two than we had last year. But I think the Bucks have done the best job that they can to do that. So there's a lot of optimism and higher expectations for me personally, as a fan for them. And I think that, something that I saw was that going into the 2021 season, or I guess that was technically the 2021 season.
Mhm.
There was a lot of doubt, surrounding the Bucks because they got, put out by the Heat, in the bubble. And there were a lot of people that kind of wrote them off going into 2021. And that was also before the Drew trade, right? So, people weren't sure if that was exactly going to work out or not. And I think that there's a similar feeling, going into this season. So maybe that's extra motivation for them. Maybe that's extra fuel. Hopefully it is. But I think the East will be interesting. I think Giannis will have added motivation. They do not have a Christmas game for the first time, and I don't know how long, which is
Yeah.
insane to have Giannis and Dame not playing on Christmas. I think their nationally televised game number dropped this season. So I think, people love to talk about, Giannis and the one-dimensionalness and things like that. But between Giannis's personal revenge that he might have and Dame's personal revenge that he might have, I ain't saying watch out or nothing like that. I'm just saying if they healthy, and things start to gel and click, I think it's going to become very clear, very soon that this is still a team to be reckoned with. But
Yeah.
with all that being said, take Drew's career, take Dame's career. Which one would you rather have?
I think the only thing that would make Drew's more enticing is the championship.
Agreed.
What it is.
How much do you care
outside of
about
the
championships?
outside of the championships, I mean, you've got game winner after game winner, and then playoff series winners after playoff series winners when it comes to Dame. If you take the championships away from Drew, then what else am I left with? Defense, and I'm not taking away from
Yeah.
Drew's capabilities. I'm not taking away from Drew's game. But when it comes to impacting your team, or when it comes to really being that key piece to like lifting your team, I'm taking Dame's career. I think the only thing that's different is look at the pieces Drew was able to work with and the pieces Dame has been able to work with. It comes down to this: would you rather CJ McCollum as your teammate, or would you rather Giannis as your teammate when you win your first chip? You know what I mean? When you win your second chip, do you rather Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown for teammates, or a situation in Portland where you're trying to force your way out and you don't know if you're going to Miami or Milwaukee? It's the same, so the situations are different on paper. Without the championships, I'm going Dame. I realize reality is the fact that Drew does have these championships, but even still, just kind of from a skill set level and how hard I'm impacting my team, I do want to go with Dame, but the championships are shiny. But I'm still going to say Dame.
No, that's very real. I don't think there's a wrong answer because both of them are going to be Hall of Famers, in my opinion.
Yes. Yep.
I do think the championships help Drew's case, whereas Dame wouldn't need a championship to be in the Hall of Fame. I,
Mhm.
I don't disagree per se with the impact piece, but what I will say is they're just different type of players, right? So I don't think
Right.
that Drew's impact is less than Dame's. I just feel like
Exactly.
it's different, right? So
Yep.
when Drew came to Milwaukee, he was expected to be the third guy, right? Like if anything, he's your defensive leader, right? Offensively, he's your third option, but that creates a good core with the team that was there, right? Going to Boston, you're asking this man to do nothing. You're asking him to do
Mhm.
nothing. But if you need him to, you can still put him on your best defender and have your top guys rest. You know what I'm saying? And if you needed an extra part, if you needed an extra spark when your first, second, and third option, are off for whatever reason, or if they tired or you rest them, yeah, he could carry that load, but situation absolutely plays a role. Uh yeah, it all depends on how you feel about championships. I mean, Drew has two, and he was very impactful in the reason that those two championships occurred. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not saying that he coasted his way to those two championships, but like you said, past that, if we're talking about accolades, if we're talking about stats, if we're talking about, I would say Dame's impact on the league is obviously much bigger,
Yeah.
than Drew's,
Yep.
right? So I think it all depends on what weighs more to you. Dame is a top
Exactly.
75 player of all time, which
Yep.
means that he will ultimately be a top 100 player, and Drew more than likely will not. And I think that the fact that Dame was able to make that list without championship
Yes.
to a lot, and also speaks to the fact that you kind of spoke to it in Portland, the wasting of Dame's prime, and granted, we can all sit here and say Dame should have requested a trade much earlier, whatever the case may be, right? But Portland also didn't do right by Dame by surrounding him with the team to win, during
Mhm.
right. So I don't think there's a right answer to that question, but for the sports people, if you had to pick a side, I think that I would pick Dame's career because I think that not having a championship, but the fact that this is even a conversation or a question, whereas with other players, if there was no championship, there would be nothing to compare. I
Yep.
think it speaks to just how much he's done and how much he's impacted. Therefore, if I'm picking a career that I like more, right, I'm probably going to say Dame. And that's with all respect to Drew, right? Again, they're both going to be Hall of Famers, so there's no right or wrong, but that's just where it falls. Um,
Mhm.
but then last but not least, we talking about Drew, focus on one of his teammates for a minute. So Jason Tatum has been the topic of discussion for a while. I mean, definitely on this pod for sure. But but from the summer, from the championship to now, he's been a topic of discussion for a lot of different reasons. Tatum is easily a top 5 player in the league, right? I don't think too many people are going to debate that. He's undoubtedly top 10. I think a lot of people are going to put him in top 5 more than likely. If not 5, he's 6, at the low for a lot of
Yeah.
people. Um, Given his comments on how the Olympics went, and given what his demeanor kind of has been even since the championship and not winning Finals MVP, what are your expectations for Tatum going into this season as a guy who's seen as a star and even a face of the league, but kind of now has this notion of not being able to be the guy or not having to be the guy, and us not really seeing that aspect, from him.
I'm gonna be honest with you. Jason Tatum sat on the podium at Media Day and
Mm.
said, I'm coming off of a season where I got a new contract, where I was on the cover of 2K and I won a championship. I saw that and I felt like, one, it was a little bit of entitlement, right? Those things happened, yes, Jason, but on the strength of who? You know what I mean? So while you view yourself as the guy because your face is on a video game and you got a chip, at the end of the day, in the playoffs, who showed up the most and most consistently was Jaylen Brown. So I felt like in that conversation or in that response to whatever the question was, there was, like I said, a sense of entitlement because, yeah, you're on the team that enjoyed that much success. And yeah, you had these individual successes throughout the summer. But if it weren't for Jaylen Brown making that shot against Indianapolis in game 1, this could be a different series. If Hallie isn't hurt, your outcome could be different. The Pacers weren't a slouch in that series at all.
Mm.
So I feel like he's taking kind of his sight off of what matters, which is his gameplay on his own was inconsistent. And that's just based off what I saw. Like, yeah, the numbers are eye catching, but look at how many shots it took to get 25 points. You know what I mean? Look at who had to play hero in late game situations. And now you're on a team where you're surrounded by KD, Steph, Bron. You're not the number one option. You know what I mean? So it's like that shouldn't be you shouldn't feel entitled to be on the floor with these players when at the end of the day, we're talking some big names and names that have been consistent in spite of whatever the situation was.
Very real, very real, very astute, may I say. But no, I completely agree. I think that's the thing. I think that we can and people have talked about this discourse becoming, tired because he's a great player. So why are we doing this? We did the same thing with every other great player, to be honest. We did this with LeBron for years. This conversation has been around Steph. Is he a top 10 player of all time? Can he surpass Magic as the greatest point guard? Like, when you're a great player, the expectations, the criteria, all of it is different. All of it changes. It's elevated.
Yes,
So I think it's more of a compliment than anything that we're having these conversations, because if you gonna be one of them ones, if you gonna be in this conversation, the response should be different, or we've seen the
absolutely.
response be different by other players who you would be insinuating that you're in the same conversation with. We're not. I'm not
Absolutely.
saying that you aren't in that conversation or shouldn't be, but to your point, he's saying, I still don't understand what happened in the Olympics. I'd be pissed. And not saying that he's not, but I would have my mentality would be, yeah, even though I don't fully understand what happened, definitely seems like I have a lot to prove, since that decision was made. Something along those lines, because like you said, Tatum, if you that guy, if you got the contract, if you was on the cover of 2K, got a championship, you ain't played no minutes in the Olympics. And people can make it about Kerr, and granted, yeah, some of Kerr's coaching decisions were questionable, but more so to the point that I feel like a lot of people made, who were you playing before when it came to your position? Bron is there, KD is there. Book, why did we talk about Book, and why was Book so prevalent? Because Book played a role, right?
Exactly.
Like, even other players, Ant had his role, AD had his role. Granted, you can make the argument that, okay, they didn't put Tatum out there, so he didn't have a chance to find his role. But also, one can make the argument, what are you bringing that's not already out there from players that have been more consistent and were more consistent over the
Exactly.
course of the season, over the course of the playoffs, even into the Olympic Games? Now, I'm not going to say it's not hard to get a rhythm when you're not playing a lot or only playing 3 or 4 minutes, whatever the case may be. And I'm not sure how much of it was that Kerr didn't have the conversation with him to let him know what it was going to be like, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, the fact that does not seem like, let me not even say that. That very well could be fuel for Tatum, right? But I think a lot of us are it's what we want to see from Bron after a while. We wanted to say, Bron, yo, you the guy, act like the guy, act like
Mm-hmm.
Timothy, okay? Tatum, if you Himothy, if you him Duncan, if you him almighty, let the world know. Ain't nobody gonna tell you wrong if you back
Mm-hmm.
up. We're not saying you don't have the right or you don't have the jurisdiction to say that, but the passiveness for me kind of is,
Yes.
I
That's
don't
the word.
like
That's the
I
word.
don't like it. I don't like it. I
I
don't.
don't. I don't. My thing is, it's this. That's exactly what I'm saying. Your response to that question is, I'm on the cover, I got a contract, I want a championship. No, that's not, like you said, that's not good enough. When he was asked, it was a game against Denver. I believe it was back in February. And he was basically asked, like, what happened late game? And he said, I didn't, and I'm loosely basically kind of summarizing what he said, but it was basically to the point of, I didn't want to take over. Well, you're Jason Tatum. And I feel like Jason has had ample opportunities to show us that Boston is his team, and he has not done that. And so Jaylen Brown took the keys and showed us that Boston is indeed his team, and he's wearing it like a cape. I mean, and I'm not saying it takes going to Twitter and saying, like, I deserve to be on this roster, but I have reason to believe that if Jason Tatum weren't on Team USA and Jaylen Brown was, there wouldn't be a conversation about Jaylen Brown sitting on the bench for the entirety of a game. Not one at all, because he makes himself undeniable. With the passiveness that Jason has, he does not make himself undeniable. He makes himself that player that Steve Kerr can walk by on the bench and not think twice about not putting in the game. And that's the part I don't like. Like you said, Passive is the absolute correct word to use when it comes to the situation. I hope that this was the moment that put a fire under Jason and he comes out a player that we just haven't seen before, or the player that we've all thought and knew that he was capable of being.
I hope so as well. We can end with this. Melo had made a point on his podcast where he said that's just not who Tatum is. And you know
Mhm.
what? It isn't. And you know, it may never be. I don't think that necessarily has to affect his legacy, his status, his impact. I think it just sucks when that is the tradition and the nature of the sport and the league. And I feel like as a player who has everything else, you have all the other intangibles, and there's this choice just to not kind of step in and own, like, and do what it takes and what it means to be that guy. That feels like a choice. Like, oh,
Yes,
that isn't you, but it doesn't have to be you 24/7. But when you're on the
right.
court, when you in season, like, past the idea of focus, past the idea of like, okay, yeah, I'm in season mode, like, when you are in season, you are the guy. You are him.
Mhm.
You are the face. Be that. Then in the off season, if you want to talk about daisies and roses, nobody cares because everybody knows when it come to that time, we know who we dealing with. And I think the thing is, sometimes when it comes to that time, we don't know who we dealing with. So
Exactly. You
and I
don't know if you're going to get Jason. I watched Jason in that finals against the Warriors back down Steph Curry. I sat in anger and disbelief watching him back down a 6'2", 6'3" when he stretches Steph Curry. That's the side of Jason I don't like. I root for Jason. I'm a St. Louis native just like he is. I've watched him since high school. I love Jason Tatum. I'm rooting for him. I just want that passiveness, that pretty boy ball to get out of him because when he's on a tear, he's on a tear. Nobody can stop him from getting to the hoop. Nobody can stop that pretty turnaround jump shot, but use it when it's necessary, not when you have a mismatch. Why are we shooting threes and you got a point guard on you? Why aren't we going to the hoop? Like that's what I don't like. He plays light skin basketball sometimes. That's what it is. It's
he
light skin
he
basketball.
definitely does play light skin basketball. And then again, sorry, no, this is truly the last point, y'all. Then we out of here. But he he may not have to do everything because of his team, but I don't think his team stops him from doing, if
Exactly.
not everything, from still being the undoubted alpha dog, right? Like, okay, yeah, you don't have to carry such a heavy load, but that don't mean that you aren't still the leader in all aspects. And if that contract meant anything in terms of being the highest paid player at the time, or is he now? Did Brown get his contract first or Tatum? I can't remember.
Brown got his first, and
Okay,
then Tatum got his this summer.
right. Okay, so you biggest contract now. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but what that mean if it can still be argued that you second fiddle? And yeah, you can talk about getting your money and everything, but what conversation you want to be in at the end of the
Yep.
day? That's
Yep.
what it comes down to. What conversation you want to be in? But but yeah, man, hey, jam-packed episode for y'all. It's a lot to take from here, a lot to take away. We haven't decided if Miguel is gonna be back for the next episode. We shall see if his suspension is up. He Draymond at this point, so he might have to go through some counseling and things like that before he can really come back. But we did miss you today, Gail. We missed you, Emilio. So no love,
Hearts,
no love
hearts
lost.
for him.
But until then, until next time, we'll catch y'all on the next episode of the Wright Quality Podcast. Peace.